Hi hobby friends, let's talk about atmosphere. We're still on the limited palette kick here at GRG Miniatures HQ, and this week I'm taking a look at the Bruised Sky palette. If you aren't sure what I'm talking about, you can check the playlist that's popping up in the corner now for the previous 2 videos on this subject. But in brief, between now and the end of September, I'm running a little community challenge here and on my Discord server. Some early birds are already working on their fantastic pieces, in fact. All you need to do is pick a palette, add a black and white of your choice, and paint a mini. You can share your results on the old socials with the hashtag LimitlessMinis, and come join us on the Discord server to post to the dedicated channel there. Oh, and if you're already on board but you're looking for paint alternatives, check the links below. I've added a section to my site listing some options from popular brands. Alright, so on to this week's painting. The Bruised Sky palette consists of turquoise deep and violet, and I'm using the usual titanium white plus Vallejo Model Colors black this week. What I'm doing here is a quick palette check. If you're trying out this challenge, I cannot recommend this process enough. It's pretty easy, just add your colours onto your palette and make some gradients from one to the other, as you see me doing here. As I've mentioned before, because blacks tend to have the tiniest bit of chromatic information in them, I'm using my black here as one of my colours, making a little triangle of hues. I've gone with Vallejo's black this week because it's warmer than the Mars black I've used previously, which will help us find some extra range in our colour temperature. I've also added some white in the middle to play with the tints of all these hues, and I've played around with some different dilutions to really get a sense of what this palette is capable of. And it certainly paid off. I am absolutely blown away by the gorgeous, rich blue you can make out of a roughly 1-to-1 mix of the 2 colours in this palette. That will definitely be featuring somewhere on my mini. Okay, we need to start painting. There's no point pretending I'm going to get a realistic human skin tone out of this, but I do think we can get something that feels believable. To do that, I've mixed up a slightly complex mix of mostly black and violet with just the tiniest smidge of turquoise in there to muddy things up a little. The first pass is very dark, and then by adding white and a little extra violet here and there, I start to build in my skin tone highlights. This palette, being completely stuck in one corner of the colour wheel, is all about atmosphere, and that really is the takeaway for me this week. Let's take a zoomed-in look at the gamut. One way of thinking about these gamuts is like a little mini colour wheel all of their own. Instead of the new traditional subtractive mixing primaries of cyan, magenta and yellow though, we're using turquoise, violet and black. In this limited, colour-shifted world, our red side of the wheel is now a muddy purplish tone, our green area is deep turquoise, and our blue to purple zone consists of more or less the quote, ideal tones. I don't think I've mentioned this yet on the channel, but in what now feels like a different life, I worked as a theatrical lighting designer, so you can hopefully trust me when I say this is exactly what happens when you wash a scene in rich, coloured light on stage. All the colours are still technically there, but you've sliced up the gamut so that what would normally be a rosy skin tone is shifted to a cool lilac tone, for example. And what does that have to do with minis? Well, if you're looking to give your army or display mini a super strong sense of time and place, and a really punchy look to boot, perhaps honing down your palette to the bare essentials could help you imitate the effect of strong lighting conditions, or at least considering your gamut carefully and trying to select from that zone. As I said before, I was keen to feature that amazing blue, so the next block to tackle for me was the shield, loincloth and the couple of armor panels on this guy. Nothing too special here, just layering in progressively lighter hues and smoothing them out with airbrush glazes later. Unfortunately, my extremely janky camera setup couldn't handle the obscenely hot weather and stopped recording for the interesting portion of that process, but I'll endeavour to catch some airbrush glazing in the future. For the mask and trim, I thought I'd take advantage of the turquoise grey available and go with a cold steel sort of a look. As with any non-metallic metal effect, this is a process of sketching out highlights and shadows and going back with layering and glazing to get the blends and effects you're after. As you can imagine, this was by far the most time-consuming part of the paint job. The working day climaxed in total disaster, with me smacking the Mini off the table by accident and losing the sword hand to the carpet goblins for all eternity. Luckily, I have spares, so when I was next at the desk we did a quick patch job and carried on. I continued to futz and fiddle with the trim, and while I'm happy enough with the results, this is certainly one of those places where you feel the squeeze of the limited palette. One way to get really nice looking non-metallic metal is to glaze in general tones, say a bluish tone for upper surfaces and an earthy tone for downward surfaces, to imitate the broad feel of reflected ground and sky. Not really an option with this guy, so I kept it simple, focusing on pushing my contrast and getting my edges sparkly. Finally, the last thing to look at was the sword. As I mentioned last time, I think it's good to hold on to your saturated, pure tones for feature details, and since he's brandishing his weapon rather flamboyantly, and I'd given myself a narrative reason to do it by yeeting the original sword into the void, I decided this saber here should get the full glory of turquoise. This colour reminded me of icicles, which matched both the shape of the sword and the mood of the Mini. One of my patrons described him as looking like he'd been marching over the tundra for days. Instead of a typical non-metallic metal effect then, I played around with something more akin to glass or ice. So here he is, my very moody take on the Bruised Sky palette. If you're taken with the idea of this limited palette challenge, check the previous videos, my Instagram account, and the Discord and website links below. I am super excited to see what magic other people can find in these limited palettes. If you want to support the channel, there's a Patreon where you can do that too, and just hitting the thumbs up button makes a massive difference to how many people get to see this video. Cheers for watching guys, and I will catch you next time.